Okay, hello everybody. I think it's necessary that we now do some phrasal verb collocations. We need to do some phrasal verbs because phrasal verbs are so common. And we've already done lots of these phrasal verbs. We did these three when we looked at crime. And I do actually have a course that just focuses on phrasal verbs. And you get my book when you get that course as well. And all of these phrasal verbs are in this book. You get the book as a PDF, of course, but there's loads of exercises and pictures in that book to help you with these phrasal verbs. But you really ought to learn phrasal verbs with the nouns that they're usually seen with. And so that's why we're looking at phrasal verb collocations. So, for example, you abide by the law, the rules, or maybe the decision of the High Court, meaning you obey the decision, you accept that that decision is final, and you obey, you adhere to that decision. And do remember adhere to, because that means stick to, and you adhere to the rules, you adhere to the law as well. And you can talk about a law-abiding citizen. So it's an adjective as well. Now, you also act on lots of different things. And if you understand the nouns, it helps you actually understand the verb as well, the meaning of the verb, because act on something means act in response to something. So you could act on somebody's advice. Follow their advice is more or less a synonym. Yeah, you act in response to their advice. You follow their advice. You can act on a hunch. Now, this word, a hunch, it means an intuition, and it's normally used with detectives. Detectives have a hunch, yeah, that somebody perhaps knows more than they're saying, and so they act on that hunch, and maybe they interrogate the suspect, they question him. Now, the police can act on a tip-off, and this is another phrasal verb, but it's being used as a noun, because if you tip off the police, you can use it as a verb, you tip off the police, that means you tell the police that somebody is guilty of a crime. You let them know about a crime. You give them information about a crime. And maybe they act on your tip-off. Yeah, hopefully they act on your tip-off. They go and arrest that suspect, or they go and perhaps search his house or something like that, acting on your information. Yeah, so you can act on somebody's information, just like you act on somebody's advice. You might act, really, the police are acting on your recommendation as well, or your suggestion. And so these two nouns collocate very well with act on, and all of these are act in response to. Now, a similar phrasal verb is follow up on, because the detectives follow up on some leads, which means that they act in response to those leads. Yeah, they decide to investigate those leads a little further. And you can also follow up on a complaint, which means deal with that complaint. That's all it means. Act in response to that complaint, deal with that complaint. And so those two collocate very well with follow up on, but you can act on a complaint as well. Okay, and you also follow somebody up on something or chase somebody up. And this means, this is slightly different. It's not quite act in response to, but it's somebody has promised to do some work for you, and you go and check that they're doing that work. You chase them up about that work. You follow them up on that promise. Yeah, and so they can be used like that as well. That's a little bit, well, less common. It's not as often you see these two being used, but it does mean go and check that that person has carried out their promise or their task, which they promised they would do. Okay, if you file for a divorce, you formally ask the courts, you apply for a divorce, you might say. But file for is much better than apply for a divorce. No, you file for a divorce. And you also file for bankruptcy when you declare yourself bankrupt. So those two nouns work very well with file for. Okay, if you come up with a suggestion, a plan, an idea, a solution as well, it means you think of a suggestion, a plan, an idea, a solution. It just means think, come up with. It means suddenly have that suggestion, plan, idea. There is something sudden about come up with. And so, yeah, you come up with an idea, a solution, a plan, a suggestion. Very useful one. Please use it often because natives certainly do. Okay, if we're dealing with crime, then the authorities or government or police come down heavily on pickpockets. Yeah, it might be a person or it might be a crime. They clamp down heavily on theft in the city centre. So it doesn't have to be a person, it could be a crime, and it just means they start to punish pickpockets more severely, or they start to monitor knife crime more strictly to make sure that they catch more people who are in possession of deadly objects. Okay, if you soak up the sunshine, it's so hot today, guys. I am definitely soaking up the sunshine, and yesterday and the day before, and it looks like it's going to be fantastic for the next 3 or 4 days. Fantastic weather. So everybody's soaking up the sunshine in this area at the moment. But if you go to a restaurant, a lovely restaurant which has a lovely atmosphere, you can say, oh, I soaked up the atmosphere, and it's usually pleasant and polite. Sorry, not polite, it's usually pleasant and nice. It's positive. Yeah, when you're soaking up the atmosphere, it doesn't normally sound like you're in a place with an awful atmosphere. You're soaking it up because you're enjoying it. You're just like when you're soaking up the sunshine, you're enjoying it. Yeah. And also a sponge in the kitchen. Yeah, a sponge is that weird object that lets water inside it. So you use a sponge to clean up, to mop up, mop up liquid, and it cleans up the liquid, it mops up the liquid, it soaks up the liquid. Look how many phrasal verbs we use with up when we're talking about picking water up from the floor. The sponge soaks it up, and you clean it up, you mop it up, you wipe it up. I suppose you could use that as well. Okay, but soak up is best. So work up. When you work up an appetite, you do loads and loads of work so that you become hungry. Yeah, and that's how you work up an appetite. It's as simple as that. If you work up a sweat, well, you do loads and loads of work so you start sweating. In fact, you can break into a sweat. I will quickly write that one as well. Break into a sweat. And that means you start sweating. Yeah, you start sweating profusely. Yeah, that's a good adverb that works with sweat or bleed, or apologise profusely. But you break into a sweat. So you can work up a sweat, meaning just that you've done lots of hard work and you're sweating now. But you can also work up some enthusiasm. And I suppose the idea here is that when you become involved in something, you become more enthusiastic about it. And so you might work up some enthusiasm for your football match by going for a run, something like that, I don't know. So you can work up enthusiasm as well. I suppose as a teacher, you ought to work up some enthusiasm among the class members.